we may have something here. Can you guys hear me now? Can you hear me? Hello? Hello? Oh, now you can hear me typing as well. Maybe. Test, 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 test. 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 Okay. So now they've added something particularly stupid. Whereas before all I had to do was on OBS hit stream, and then the stream would just start. On the new interface I had to go hit the button that said go live. Who would have thought? I mean, just making things complicated. Okay, so am I coming through? Can we all hear me? I mean, I can hear me fine, but I am in the same room as me. Okay, the problem is I used to have my mic set up for streaming. Now I've changed it so that I can do a bit better job with the recording, which is slightly different spacing and volume controls. Okay, so we seem to have something here, which is always good. I mean, it can't really be a stream unless you boomer it up a little. And take some serious boomering, but once you get going, then that's the main thing. Okay. So this is a stream that I've kind of been thinking about doing for a while. Mostly for a sort of channel update stream. As most of my audience comes from various places, and some of those places don't allow me to do sort of upkeep on the channel. So if I want to inform people of what's happening, there's the community tab, but that doesn't seem to hit everybody. So I figured if going forward, maybe doing a stream where I go through, you know, any changes to the channel recently, anything that's going to be changing in the future, just to keep people in the loop so that they know what's happening. And then possibly do some other stuff as well. I have some ideas of where I'd want to take the stream. But, yeah, so I decided we'll do it this weekend. I also chose this time because for me, it is exactly the middle of the weekend. Cannot go more weekend than I am currently, because it's 12 o'clock on a Saturday night. Or Sunday morning, depending on which one you want. And with the recent world events, there are more people sitting at home looking for entertainment, so I thought I would try to do my bit to provide some more entertainment for people, if they so wish. Now, I'm not really going to be speaking about these events, because, well, I'm sure, like me, most of you are tired of all this stuff. Okay. For the channel-wise, this week and next week, or for the foreseeable future, there's nothing much is going to change. We'll continue plodding along through the HFY one-shots and series. I think the next big thing happening there is Flintstone's going to be ending next week on Tuesday. Thank you very much, Super Carl fan. It is very much appreciated. So, yes, Flintstone's going to be ending on Tuesday. It's the end of Book 2, and there's only one chapter in Book 3, so I'm not going to be doing Book 3. I prefer to wait until there's the full book out. So, starting on Wednesday, let me see if I got that right day. Thursday. I'll be moving on to the fourth wave, which is also another classic HFY series. And then we'll mosey our way through that. There's quite a lot of content there, so it'll take a good chunk of time. And from the Royal Road side, I can only read what exists, so if you want to bug anybody about the End of Stone, I wouldn't say go bug the author, but I can't magic more chapters into being. If I could, I would. So yeah, the Royal Road side, nothing much is going to change for the next little while. We've got Fork This Life. It's going to continue on until end of next month, and Metaworld Chronicles is also pretty much until the end of next month. And that's pretty much the upkeep for that side. I do have some more Royal Road stuff planned in for when this current stuff runs out. So we won't run into a situation where we're running a series light again. That was just a lot of time I spent reading and asking for permission, and then just not getting any word back about the permissions. So I just ran out of time. And there's only so much reading I can do in a day for looking at new series. Because, especially with the Royal Road series, ones that are continuous, I don't want to head into a series unless I've at least read a good chunk of it. Okay, what else? That should be it for the upkeep of the channel. I've lost chat. So, for tonight, I was thinking I was going to do a public reading, a public domain of Deathworld by Harry Harrison. Just as some form of entertainment. We can have a chat, we can discuss it. A lot less serious than what I normally do with the pre-recorded stuff. There are going to be mistakes, and you're more than welcome to call me out on it and laugh at me. Now you can see how many mistakes I actually make when I'm talking, which is a few. Especially when I have this thing where I have a random accent to jump in. I call it random Scottish, where you talk a normal sentence and all of a sudden one word is kind of weird. It's just this heavy accent comes through, and I have no idea where it comes from. I mean, the Scottish part is from my mother, but I've never been there, so I wouldn't know why that accent jumps in. For those, I think most of the people on my channel now wouldn't know that originally I started off doing live reads way back when. It was more of the web novel stuff from webnovel.com, copyrighted. So eventually, after some minor issues, I decided to move to a different direction and started doing the pre-recording stuff. But I think that throwing in some live reads can be fun, especially with a bit of audience participation. And also, depending on how receptive people are to the stream and this sort of content, I might do it on a more regular basis than on a weekly basis. But for now, I'm looking at doing it for Saturdays. Right, I think that's it. We shall move on to a bit of reading. Live reading. As soon as I click the right button. Okay. And you guys must let me know, is this font big enough? Can you read what's on the screen? Because I can read what's on the screen, but I know when I previously did the live reads, people enjoyed having the text on the screen as well. That way they could double check to make sure I was doing the right thing. Why is this only coming through in 3? Okay. I just realized that my stream is only streaming at 320, 360p. It's horrible. Horrible. And there's nothing I can really do about it without stopping the stream, I think. Why? Just give me a second. I want to... because I haven't changed the settings of my OBS. So the output should be the same way it always was, which was 1080p. Unless there is something in the settings that I've changed. Nope. Very strange. Maybe it's just my side that is limiting my quality for some reason. Okay, so yes, this is an old sci-fi novel. We'll work our way through it. We'll see how it goes. I'm planning on maybe streaming for an hour, hour and a half after this. Until, I mean, it's 12:30 at the moment, so about 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. But, I mean, if we hit a nice patch, it's very weird. Like I said, I think it's because I'm the one streaming that YouTube doesn't want to let me go higher resolution. And, okay, that's fair enough. So yes, there's going to be more breathing sounds and tapping sounds than the usual stuff, but there's also more opportunity to interact, which is always entertaining in and of itself. Okay, starting off as soon as I get chat in the right place. Chapter 1. Jason Denault sprawled in a Oh, by the way, I haven't actually read this before. I haven't done any pre-reading, so this is the first time. So we're all in the same boat. So we can talk about the craziness, if there is any. Or, I assume that it's a good book, because, well, actually, there is no reason. It had a nice name. Yeah, I mean, it is extremely late for me, but my sleep cycle has been messed up for a while now, so I'm normally awake at this time. Chapter 1. Jason Denault was sprawled in a soft luxury on the couch, a large, frosty stain held limply in one hand. His other hand was resting casually on a pillow. The gun behind the pillow was within easy reach of his fingers. In his line of work, he never took chances. It was all highly suspicious. Jason didn't know a soul on this planet, yet the card sent by the service tube from the hotel desk read, "Kirk Pyrrhus would like to see you, Jason Denault." Blunt and to the point, he signaled the desk to send a man up, and then lowered his fingers a bit until it brushed against the gun butt. The door slid open, and his visitor stepped through. A retired wrestler. That was Jason's first thought. Kirk Pyrrhus was a grey-haired rock of a man, his body seemingly chiseled out of the flat stabs of muscle. Then Jason saw the gun strapped to the inside of the man's forearm, and he let his fingers drop casually behind the pillow. "I appreciate it," Jason said. "If you take off the gun while you're in here." The other man stopped and scowled down at the gun as if he was seeing it for the first time. "No, I never take it off," he said, mildly annoyed at the suggestion. Jason had his fingers at his own gun when he said it. "I'm afraid I'll have to insist. I always feel a little uncomfortable around people who wear guns." He kept talking to distract the attention while he pulled out his gun, fast and smoothed. He could have been moving in slow motion for all the difference it made. Kirk Pyrrhus stock rock still while the gun came out, while it swung in his direction. Not until the very last instant did he act. When he did, the motion wasn't visible. First his gun was in his arm holster, then it was aimed between Jason's eyes. It was an ugly, heavy weapon with a pitted front orifice that showed plenty of use. And Jason knew if he swung his own weapon for a fraction of an inch more, he would be dead. He dropped the arm carefully, and Kirk flipped his gun over back of his holster with the same ease that he'd drawn it. "Now," the stranger said, "if we're through playing, let's get down to business. I have a proposition for you." Jason downed a large mouthful from the mug and bridled his temper. He was fast with the gun. His life had depended on it more than once, and this was the first time he'd been outdrawn. It was the offhand, unimportant manner that it had been done that irritated him. "I'm not prepared to do business," he said acidly. "I've come to Cresselia for a vacation. Get away from work." "Let's not fool each other, Denault," Kirk said impatiently. "You've never worked an honest job in your entire life. You're a professional gambler, and that's why I'm here to see you." Jason forced his anger down and threw the gun at the other end of the couch so that he wouldn't be tempted to commit suicide. He had hoped that no one knew him on Cresselia and was looking forward to the big kill in Casino. He would worry about the latter. The weight-lifter type seemed to know all. The answers. That was a very bad transition. My scroll wasn't working. "Let him plot the course for a while and see where it led." "All right, what do you want?" Kirk dropped into a chair that creaked ominously under his weight and dug an envelope out of one pocket. He flipped it through quickly and dropped a handful of gleaming galactic exchange notes onto the table. Jason glanced at them and then sat up suddenly. "What are they forgeries?" he asked, holding up one to the light. "They're real enough," Kirk told him. "I picked them up at the bank. Exactly 27 bills, or 27 million credits. I want you to use them as a bankroll when you go to the casino tonight. Gamble with them and win." They looked real enough, and they could be checked. Jason's fingers ran through them thoughtfully while he examined the other man. "I don't know what you have in mind," he said, "but you realize I can't make any guarantees. I gamble, but I don't always win." "You gamble, and you win when you want to," Kirk said grimly. "We looked into that quite carefully before I came to you." "If you mean to say that I cheat..." Carefully, Jason grabbed his temper again and held it down. There was no future in getting annoyed. Kirk continued in the same level voice, ignoring Jason's growing anger. "Maybe you don't call it cheating. Frankly, I don't care. As far as I'm concerned, you could have your suit lined up with aces and electromagnets in your boots, as long as you won. I'm not here to discuss moral points with you. I said I had a proposition. We have worked hard for that money, but it still isn't enough. To be precise, we need 3 billion credits. The only way to get that sum is by gambling, with these 27 million as a bankroll." "And what do I get out of this?" Jason asked the question coolly, as if any bit of his fantastic proposition made sense. "Everything above the 3 billion you can keep. That should be fair enough. You're not risking your own money, but you stand to make enough to keep your life if you win." "And if I lose?" Kirk thought for a moment, not liking the taste of the idea. "Yes, there is a chance you might lose. I hadn't thought about that." He reached a decision. "If you lose, well, I suppose it's just the risk that we'll have to take. Though I think that I would kill you then. The ones who died to get the 27 million deserve at least that." He said it quietly, without malice, and it was more of a promise than a threat. Stamping his feet, Jason refilled the stain he offered about Kirk, who took it with a nod and thanks. He paced back and forth, unable to sit. The whole proposition made him angry, yet at the same time had a fatal fascination. He was a gambler, and his talk was like the taste of drugs to an addict. Stopping suddenly, he realized that his mind had been made up for some time. Win or lose, live or die, how could he say no to the chance to gamble with money like that? He turned suddenly and jabbed his finger at the big man in the chair. I'll do it. You probably knew I would from the time you came in here. There are some terms of my own, though. I want to know who you are, and who they were keeping talking about, and where did the money come from? Is it stolen? Kirk drained his own stain and pushed it away from him. Stolen money? No, not quite the opposite. 2 years' work mining and refining all to get it. It was mined on Pyrrhus and sold here in Cilicia. You can check that very easily. I sold it. I'm the Pyrrhic ambassador to this planet. He smiled at the thought. Not that that means much. I'm an ambassador to just 6 other planets as well. Comes in handy when you want to do business. Jason looked at the muscular man with the grey hair and worn military-cut clothes and decided not to laugh. You heard the strange things out in the frontier planets, and every word of it could be true. We had never heard of Pyrrhus either, though that didn't mean anything. There were over 36,000 known planets in the inhabited universe. I'll check on what you have told me, Jason said. If it's true, we could do business. Call me tomorrow. No, Kirk said. The money has to be won tonight. I've already issued the check for this 27 million. It'll bounce as high as the Palisades unless we deposit the money in the morning. So that's our time limit. With each moment, the whole affair became more fantastic and more intriguing for Jason. He looked at his watch. There was still enough time to find out if Kirk was lying or not. All right, we'll do it tonight, he said. Only I'll have to have one of those bills to check. Kirk stood up to go. Take 'em all. I won't be seeing you until after you've won. I'll be at the casino, of course, but I don't recognize me. It would be too much better if you didn't know where the money was coming from and how much you had. Then he was gone. After a bone-crushing hand clap that closed Jason's hand like a vice jaws, Jason was alone with the money, fanning the bills to stop him from just walking out the door with them and vanishing. Nothing, really, except his own sense of honor. Kirk Pyrrhus, the man with the same last name as the planet from the Kirk Pyrrhus, the man with the same last name as the planet he came from, was the universe's biggest fool. Or he knew just what he was doing. He knows I would much rather gamble than money than steal it, he said wryly. This one's a little bit before the J-verse one. This one was written in 1960, 1950. That's why I typed in no, not that one in the title. Slipping a small gun into his waistband holster and pocketing the money, he went on. End of chapter. Just gonna get a bit of a drink here. You want me to turn the background music off, leave it on? Don't know whether it's distracting or not. Hopefully I haven't been sitting talking to myself for the last half an hour again. Although it wouldn't be the first time. And probably won't be the last time either. Barely audible. That's weird. Let me just fiddle with some settings. Ah, okay. Yeah, I mean, I decided to have it in the background very low so it didn't get too distracting. I'm glad to hear that, Anton. I'm glad you enjoy. Okay, we ready for chapter 2? And I'm not exactly sure why there would be such a lag. Let me just try something. Nope, I can't change it. Because I'm on a normal latency setting, so that could be why there's a bit of a lag. I didn't think we needed the ultra-low latency setting, which just increases processing power. But live and learn. Well, next time we can do the full... I think we'll go with the medium setting for latency. Okay, moving on to chapter number 2. As soon as I open up the right screen. Okay, chapter number 2. The robot teller at the bank just pinged with an electronic shock when he presented one of the bills and flashed a panel that directed him to see the Vice President Wayne. Wayne was a smooth customer who Bug's eyes lost some of its tan when he saw the sheaf of bills. "You wish to deposit these with us?" he asked while his fingers unconsciously stroked them. "Not today," Jason said. "They were paid to me as a debt. Would you please check if they are authentic and change them? I'd like 500,000 credit notes." Both of his inner chest pockets were packed tight with what was left at the bank. The bills were good, and he felt like a walking mint. This was the first time in his entire life that carrying such a large sum of money made him so uncomfortable. Waving to a passing hedicab, he went directly to the casino, where he knew that he would be safe for a while. Cassidia Casino was the play spot of the nearby cluster of star systems. It was the first time Jason had seen it, though he knew the type well. He had spent most of his adult life in casinos like the ones on the other worlds. The decor was differed, but they were always the same. Gambling and the socialities in public, the behind-the-scenes of all the private vice that you could afford. Theoretically, no-limit games, but that was true only up to a certain point. When the house was really hurt, the honest game stopped being square, and the big winner had to watch his step very carefully. These were the odds Jason Denault had played against countless times before. He was wary of the very concerned. The dining room was almost empty, and the Major Domino quickly rushed to the side of the relaxed stranger in the richly cut clothes. Jason was lean and dark, looking more like a bored scion of some rich family than a professional gambler. This appearance was important as he cultivated it. The cuisine looked good, and the cellar turned out to be wonderful. He had a professional talk with the sommelier while waiting for the soup, and then he settled down to enjoy his meal. He ate leisurely at a large dining room well filled before his throw. Watching the entertainment over a long cigar killed some more time. When he finally went to the gaming rooms, they were filled with and active. Moving slowly around the room, he dropped a few thousand credits. He scarcely noticed how he played, giving more attention to the feel of the games. The play all seemed honest, and none of the equipment was rigged, but could be changed very quickly, he realized. Usually, it wasn't necessary. House percentages was enough to assure profit. Once he saw Kirk out of the corner of his eyes, but paid him no attention. The ambassador was losing small sums steadily, and silver, and seemed to be impatient, probably waiting for Jason to begin playing seriously. He seemed to stroll by slowly. Jason settled on the dice table that he usually did. It was the surest way to make a small winnings. And if tonight he was a clean casino out. That was his secret, the power that he won for us steadily. For every once in a while enabled him to make a killing and move on quickly before the hired thugs came to get the money back. The dice reached him and he threw 8 the hard way, betting the light, and he didn't push himself. He just kept away from the sevens. He made the point and passed a natural, and then he crapped out and the dice moved. Sitting there, making small automatic bets while the dice went around the table, he thought about the power. Funny, after all the years of work, he still didn't know much about Psi. They can train people a bit and improve skills a bit, but that's all. He was feeling strong tonight. He knew that the money in his pocket gave him a little bit of extra lift that sometimes helped him break through. With his eyes half closed, he picked up the dice. He let his mind gently caress the pattern of the sunken dots, and then shot out his hand as he stared at the 7. It was there. Stronger than he had felt it in years. The stiff weight of those million-credit notes had done it. The world around was sharp and clear, and the dice was completely in his control. He knew the 10th credit, how much the other players had in their wallets, and was aware of the cards in the hands of those players behind him. Slowly, carefully, he built up the stakes. There was no effort to the dice. They rolled and sat up like trained dogs. Jason took his time and concentrated on the psychology of the players and the stick man. It took almost 2 hours to build up the money on the table to 700,000 credits. Then he caught the Sigman signaling that they had a heavy winner. He waited until the hard-eyed man strolled over to watch the game, and then he smiled happily, bet all his table stakes, and blew it all in one roll of the dice. The houseman smiled happily, and the stick man relaxed, and out of the corner of his eye, Jason saw Kirk turning a dark purple. Sweating, pale, his hand trembling ever so slightly, Jason opened the front of his jacket and pulled out one of the envelopes of new bills. Breaking the seal with his finger, he dropped 2 of them on the table. "Could we have a no-limit game?" he asked. "I'd like to, win back my money." The stick man had trouble controlling his smile now. He glanced across the houseman, who nodded a quick yes. They had a sucker, and they meant to clean him out. He had been playing from his wallet all evening. Now he was cracking into a sealed envelope to try for what he had lost. A thick envelope, too, and probably not his money. Not that the house cared in the least. To them, money had no loyalties. To play was on the casino in a very relaxed mood, which was just the way that Jason wanted it. He needed to get as deep into them as he could before someone realized that they might be on the losing end. The rough stuff would start, and he wanted to put it off as long as possible. It would be hard to win smoothly then, and his side power might go as quickly as it had come. That had happened before. He was playing against the house now, and 2 other players were oblivious shills, and the crowd was jammed solidly around to watch. After losing and winning a bit, he hit a streak of naturals, and his pile of gold chips tottered higher and higher. There was nearly $1 billion there, he estimated, roughly. The dice were still falling true, though he was soaked with the sweat from the effort. Betting the entire stack of chips, he reached for the dice. The stick man reached faster and hooked them back. "House calls for new dice," the man said flatly. Jason straightened up and wiped his hands, glad for the instant relief. This was the 3rd time the house had changed dice to try and break his winning streak. It was their privilege. The hard-eyed casino man opened his wallet as he had done before and drew out a pair of random, stripping off their plastic cover and threw them in the length of the table to Jason. They came up a natural 7, and Jason smiled. When he scooped them up and the smile slowly faded, the dice were transparent, finely made and evenly weighted on all sides, and crooked. The pigment on the dots on all 5 sides of each die was some heavy metal compound, probably lead. The 6th side was a ferrous compound. They would roll true unless they hit a magnetic field. That meant the entire surface of the table could be magnetized. He could never have spotted the difference if he hadn't looked at the dice with his mind. But what could he do about it? Shaking them softly, he glanced quickly around the table. There was what he needed, an ashtray with a magnet in its base to hold it into the metal edge of the table. Jason stopped shaking the dice and looked at them quizzically. He then reached over and grabbed the ashtray and dropped the base against his hand. As he lifted the ashtray, there was a concerted gasp from all sides. The dice were sticking there, upside down, boxcars showing. "Are these what you'd call honest dice?" he asked. The man who'd thrown out the dice reached quickly for his hip pocket. Jason was the only one who saw what happened next. He was watching the hand closely, his own fingers near the gun butt. As the man dived into his pocket, the hand reached out to the crowd behind him. From the square-cut size of it could belong to only one person. A thick thumb and index finger clamped swiftly around the houseman's wrist. Then they were gone. The man screamed shrilly as he held up his arm, his hand dangling limp out of the glove from the broken wrist bones. With his flank well protected, Jason could go on with the game. "The old dice, if you don't mind," he said quietly. Dazedly, the stick man pushed them over. Jason shook quickly and rolled. Before they hit the table, he realized that he couldn't control them. The transparent psi power was gone. End over end they turned and faced up 7. Counting the chips as they were pushed over to him, he added up a bit under 2 billion credits. They would be winning that much if he had left the game now, but it wasn't the 3 billion that Kirk needed. Well, it would have to be enough. As he reached for the chips, he caught Kirk's eye across the table, and the other man shook his head at a steady no. "Let it ride," Jason said warily. "One more roll." He breathed on the dice, polished them with his cuff, and wondered how he had ever gotten into the spot. Billions riding on the pair of dice, that was as much as the annual income of some planets. The only reason there could be stakes like this was because planetary governments had a stake in the casino. He shook as long as he could, reaching for the control that wasn't there. And then he let fly. Sorry, just had to clear my throat. Eventually, everything else had dropped in the casino and people were standing around the tables and chairs to watch. There wasn't a sound from the large crowd. The dice bounced back from the board and the clatter, loud silence, and tumbled over a cloth. The 5 and 1, 6. He still had to make his point. Scooping up the dice, Jason talked to them, mumbled an ancient oath that brought back luck, and threw again. It took 5 throws before he made the 6. The crowd echoed the sigh and the voices rose quickly. He wanted to stop, to take a breath, but he knew that he couldn't. Winning the money was the only part of the job. They've now had to get away with it. It took a look casual. A waiter was passing with a tray of drinks. Jason stopped him and tucked 100 credit notes into his pocket. "Drinks are on me," he shouted while he pried the tray out of the waiter's hands. The well-wishers clearly filled the glasses away quickly, and Jason piled the chips onto the tray. There were more loaded onto it, but Kirk appeared at that moment with a second tray. "I'll be glad to help you, sir, if you'll permit me," he said. Jason looked at him and laughed permission. If it was the first time he had a clear look at Kirk in the casino, he was wearing loose purple evening pajamas over what must have been a false stomach. The sleeves were long and baggy, so he looked rather fat and muscular. It was a simple but effective disguise. Carefully carrying the loaded trays surrounded by a crowd of excited patrons, they made their way to the cashier's window. The manager himself was there, wearing a sickly grin. Even the grin faded when they counted the chips. "Could you come back in the morning?" he said. "I'm afraid that we don't have that kind of money on hand." "What's the matter?" Kirk shouted, trying to get out of paying him. "You took my money easy enough when I lost it. It works both ways." The onlookers, always happy to see the house lose, growled their disagreement. Jason finished the matter in a loud voice. "I'll be reasonable. Give me what cash you have, and I'll take a check for the balance." There was no way out. Under the watchful eye of the gleeful crowd, the manager packed an envelope with bills and wrote a check. Jason took a quick glance at it and then stuffed it into his inside pocket. With the envelope under one arm, he followed Kirk towards the door. Because of the onlookers, there was no trouble in the main room, but just as they reached the side entrance, 2 men moved in, blocking their way. "Just a moment," one said. He never finished the sentence. Kirk walked into them without slowing down, and he bounced away like 10 pins. Then Kirk and Jason were out of the building and walking fast. "Into the parking lot," Kirk said. "I have a car there." When they rounded the corner, there was a car bearing down on them. Before Jason could get his gun clear of the holster, Kirk was in front of him. His arm came up and his big, ugly gun burst through the cloth of his sleeve and jumped into his hand. A single shot killed the driver and the car swerved and crashed. The other 2 men in the car died coming out of the door, their guns dropping from their hands. After that, they had no trouble. Kirk drove at top speed away from the casino and then tore the sleeve of his pajamas, whipping it out into the breeze, giving glimpses of the big gun back into the holster. "When you get the chance," Jason said, "you'll have to show me how that trick holster works." "When we get the chance," Kirk answered as he dived the car into the city's tubes. End of chapter. Just a random comment here. It's amazing how billions in 1950 was so much that a planet would earn billions. But now, in this day and age, corporations earn billions. People earn billions. A planet would earn trillions, if not more. It's funny how outdated numbers, or how quickly numbers can be shifted. It reminds me of the old Austin Powers joke. Billions! Yeah, that's pocket change. Especially in whatever undescribed future this is. I mean, we have corporations. What was it? Amazon was the first one to go over $1 trillion in worth. But anyways. Chapter number 3. The building they stopped at was one of the finer residences in Cassilia. As they had driven, Jason counted the money and separated his share. Almost 16 million credits. It still didn't seem quite real. When they got in front of the building, he gave Kirk the rest. "Here's your 3 billion. Don't think it was easy," he said. "It could have been worse," was the only answer. The recorded voice snatched from the speaker over the door. "Sir Ellis has retired for the night. Would you please call again tomorrow morning? All appointments are made in advance." The voice broke off as Kirk pushed the door open. He did it almost effortlessly with the flat of his hand. As they went in, Jason looked at the remnants of the torn and twisted metal thing that the hinge had locked and wondered again about his companion. Strength. More than physical strength. He's like an elemental force. I have the feeling that nothing can stop him. It made him hungry, and at the same time fascinated him. He didn't want to be out of the deal until he found out more about Kirk and his planet, and they who had died for the money he had gambled. Sir Ellis was old, balding, and angry, not at all used to having his rest disturbed. His complaints stopped suddenly when Kirk threw the money down on the table. "Is the ship being loaded yet, Ellis? Here's the balance due." Ellis only fumbled the balls for a moment before he could answer Kirk's question. "The ship? But of course, we've begun loading when you gave us the deposit. You'll have to excuse my confusion. This is just a little irregular. We never handle transactions of this size in cash." "That's the way I like to do business," Kirk answered him. I've cancelled the deposit. This is the total sum. Now how about a receipt? Ellis made out a receipt for his senses returned. He held it tightly while he looked uncomfortably at the 3 billion spread on front of him. Wait, I can't take it now. You'll have to return in the morning to the bank in normal business fashion, Ellis decided firmly. Kirk reached over and gently drew the paper out of Ellis's hands. Thanks for the receipt, he said. I won't be here in the morning, so this will be satisfactory. And if you're worried about the money, I suggest you get in touch with some of your plant guards and private police. You'll feel a lot safer. When they left through the shattered doors, Ellis was frantically dialing numbers on his screen. Kirk answered Jason's next question before he could even ask it. I imagine that you would like to spend the money in your pocket, so I've booked 2 seats of an interplanetary ship. He glanced at the car clock. It leaves us about 2 hours, so we have plenty of time. I'm hungry. Let's find a restaurant. I hope that you have nothing at hotel worth going back for. It would be a little difficult. Nothing worth getting killed for, Jason said. Now where can we go to eat? There are a few questions I'd like to ask you. They circled carefully down the transport levels until they were sure that they hadn't been followed. Kirk nosed the car into the darkened loading dock where they had abandoned it. We can always get another car, he said, and they probably have this one spotted. Let's walk back to the freightway. I saw a restaurant there as we came by. Dark and looming shapes of the overland freight carriers filled the parking lot. They picked their way around the man-high wheels and into the hot, noisy restaurant. The drivers of the early morning workers took no notice of them as they found a booth in the back and dialed a meal. Kirk chiseled a chunk of meat off the slab in front of him and popped it cheerfully into his mouth. Ask you questions, he said. I'm feeling much better already. What is the ship that you've arranged for tonight? What kind of cargo was I risking my neck for? I thought that you were risking your neck for money, Kirk said dryly. But be assured that it is the good cause. That cargo means the survival of the world. Guns, ammunition, mines, explosives, and such. Jason choked over a mouthful of food. Gun running? What are you doing, financing a private war? And how can you talk about survival with a lethal cargo like that? Don't try to tell me that they have peaceful use. Who are you killing? Most of the big man's humor had vanished. He had that grim look that Jason knew well. Yes, peaceful would be the right word, because that is basically all we want. Just to live in peace. And it is not who we are killing, it is what we are killing. Jason pulled his plate away with an angry gesture. You're talking in riddles, he said. What has nothing to do, no meaning. It is meaning enough, Kirk told him, but only to one planet in the universe. Just how much do you know about Pyrus? Absolutely nothing. For a moment, Kirk sat wrapped up in memories, scowling distantly. Then he went on. Mankind doesn't belong on Pyrus, yet has been there for almost 300 years now. The age expectancy of my people is 16 years. Of course, most adults live beyond that, but the high child mortality brings the average down. It is everything that a humanoid world should not be. The gravity is nearly twice Earth's normal. The temperature can vary daily and erratic and arctic to tropic. The climate, well, you have to experience it to believe it, like nothing you've seen anywhere else in the galaxy. I'm frightened, Jason said dryly. What do you have, methane or chlorine reactions? I've been down on planets like that. Kirk slammed a hand down on the table. The dishes bounced and the table legs creaked. Laboratory reactions, he growled. They look like a grate on a bench, but what happens when you have a world filled with those compounds? In an eye wink of galactic time, all violence is locked up in a nice stable compounds. The atmosphere may be poisonous for an oxygen breather, but taken by itself it is harmless as a weak beer. There is only one setup that is pure poison as a planetary atmosphere. Plenty of H2O, the most universal solvent that you can find, plus free oxygen to work on. Water and oxygen, Jason broke in. You mean Earth, or a planet like Sicilia here? That's preposterous. Not at all. Because you were born in this kind of environment, you accept it as natural and right. You take it for granted that metals corrode and coastlines change, and storms interfere with communications. These are normal occurrences on oxygen water worlds. On Pyrus, these conditions are carried to the nth degree. The planet has an axial tilt of almost 42 degrees, and there is a tremendous change in temperature from season to season. This is one of the prime causes of the constantly changing ice cap. The weather generated by this spectacular is to say the least. If that's all, Jason said, I don't see why. That's not all. It's barely the beginning. The open seas perform a dual destructive function of supplying water vapor and deep weather going, and building up gigantic tides. Pyrus's 2 satellites, Samos and Bessos, combine the times to pull the ocean up to 30-meter tides. And until you've seen one of these tides lap over an active volcano, you've seen nothing. Heavy elements are what brought us Pyrus, and the same elements keep the planet at a volcanic boil. There have been at least 13 supernovas in the immediate stellar neighborhood. Heavy elements can be found, and most of their planets, of course, as well as a completely unbreathable atmosphere. Long-term mining and exploitation can't be done with anything but self-sustaining colonies, which meant Pyrus, where the radioactive elements are locked into the planetary core, surrounded by a shell of lighter ones. While this allows for the atmosphere men need, it also provides an unceasing volcanic activity as the molten plasma forces its way to the surface. For the first time, Jason was silent, trying to imagine what life could be like on a planet constantly at war with itself. I saved the best for last, Kirk said with a grim humor. Now that you have an idea of what the environment is like, think of a kind of life that forms that would populate it. I doubt if there would be one-off-word species that would live a minute. Plants and animals on Pyrus are tough. They fight the world and they fight each other. Hundreds of thousands of Hundreds of thousands of years of genetic weeding out have produced things that would even give an electric brain nightmares. Armor-plating poisons, claw-tipped and fanged mouth. These descriptions describe everything that walks, flaps, or sits and grows. Ever see a plant with teeth that bites? I don't think you want to. You have to be on Pyrus, and that means that you'll be dead within seconds of leaving the ship. Even I'll have to take a refresher course before I'll be able to go outside the landing building. The unending war of survival keeps life forms competing and changing. Death is simple, but the ways of dealing it is too numerous to list. Unhappiness rode like a weight on Kirk's broad shoulders. After a long moment of thought, he moved visibly to shake it off. Returning his attention to his food and mopping up the gravy of his plate, his voice part of his feelings. I suppose there is no logical reason why we should stay and fight the endless war, except that Pyrus is home. The last piece of gravy-soaked bread vanished, and he waved the empty fork at Jason. Be happy that you're an off-worlder and will never have to see it. That's where you're wrong, Jason said calmly as he could. You see, I'm going back with you. End of chapter. So all in all, it sounds like a lovely planet, place where you wanted to build a beachfront property. If you wanted that beachfront property to burn instantly. It is my pleasure. As long as you guys enjoy it and come back for more, that's all I ask for. I think the tricky part will be finding the best time to do the sort of stream where most people would be able to watch it. Well, yeah, I mean, you could be an easy blacksmith. You don't even need a shop. You just need to go outside. I think this will be the last chapter for the evening, and then I will continue, I think, next week with the story. And hopefully next week we'll have a bit better of an audience. Maybe less technical issues. We might even get 5 chapters out next week. So let's plow on with this chapter, and then we can see where we go. Chapter number 4. Don't talk stupidly, Kirk said as he punched for the duplicate order of steak. There are much simpler ways to commit suicide. Don't you realize that you're a millionaire now? With what you have in your pocket, you can relax for the rest of your life on the pleasure planets. Pyrus is a Deathworld, not a sightseeing spot for jaded tourists. I cannot permit you to return with me. Gamblers who lose their tempers don't last long. Jason was angry now, yet it showed only in the negative way, in a lack of expression on his face and the calmness of his voice. Don't tell me what I can and cannot do, Kirk Pyrus. You're a big man with a fast gun, but that doesn't make you my boss. All you can do is stop me from going back on your ship, but I can easily afford to get there another way. And don't try to tell me that I won't go to Pyrus for sightseeing when you have no idea of my real intentions. Jason didn't even try to explain his reasons. They were only half realized and too personal. The more he traveled, the more things looked the same to him. The old civilized planets sank into drab similarity. Frontier worlds all had the crude sameness of temporary camps and forest. Not that the galactic worlds bored him. It was just that he had found their limitations. Yet he had never found his own. Until he'd met Kirk, he had acknowledged no man his superior, or even his equal. This was more than egotism. It was facing facts. Now he was forced to face the fact that there was a whole world of people who might be superior to him. Jason could never rest content until he had been there and seen for himself, even if he died in the attempt. None of this could be told to Kirk. There were other reasons that he understood better. You're not thinking ahead when you prevent me from going to Pyrus, Jason said. I'll not mention any moral debt that you owe me for winning the money you needed. But what about the next time? If you needed that much lethal goods at once, you're probably going to need it again someday. Wouldn't it be better to have me on hand? Old, tried, and true, than dreaming up some new, possibly unreliable scheme. Kirk chewed pensively on the second serving of steak. That makes sense, and I must admit that I hadn't thought of it before. One failing we Pyrians have is a lack of interest in the future. Staying alive day by day is enough trouble. So we tend to face emergencies as they arrive and let the dim future planet. All expenses paid, on the condition that you obey completely all the instructions regarding your personal safety. Conditions accepted, Jason said, and wondered why he was so cheerful about signing his own death warrant. Kirk was shoveling his way through his third dessert when his alarm watch gave him a tiny hum. He dropped his fork instantly and stood up. Time to go, he said. We're on a schedule now. While Jason stumbled to his feet, he jammed coins into the meter until he'd paid. The light came up. Then they went out of the door, walking fast. Jason wasn't all that surprised when they came up to a public escalator just behind the restaurant. He was beginning to realize that since leaving the casino, their every move had been carefully planned and timed. Without a doubt, the alarm was out of the entire planet being searched for them. Yet, so far, they hadn't noticed the slightest sign of pursuit. This wasn't the first time that Jason had to move just one jump ahead of the authorities, but it was the first time that he'd let someone else lead him by the hand while he did it. He had to smile at his own automatic agreement. He had been a loner for so many years that he had found a certain inverse pleasure at following someone else. "Hurry up," Kirk growled as a quick glance at his watch. He set a steady, killing pace and up the escalator steps. They went up 5 levels that way without seeing another person, before Kirk relented and let the escalator do the work. Jason prided himself on keeping in condition, but the sudden climb after the sleepless night left him panting heavily and soaked in sweat. Kirk, cool of forehead and breathing normally, didn't show the slightest sign that he had been running. They were on the second motor level when Kirk stepped off and slowly rising steps and waved Jason over. They came through the exit of the streetcar and pulled up to the curb in front of them. Jason had enough sense not to reach for his gun. At the exact moment that they reached the car, the driver opened the door and stepped out. Kirk passed him and slipped the paper without saying a word and slipped in behind the wheel. There was time for Jason to jump in before the car pulled away. The entire transfer had taken less than 3 seconds. There had only been a glimpse of the driver in the dim light, but Jason had recognized him. Of course, he had never seen the man before, but after knowing Kirk, he couldn't mistake the compact strength of a native Parian. "That was a receipt from Ellis that you gave him," Jason said. "Of course, that takes care of the ship and the cargo. They'll be off-planet and safely away before the casino can check and trace old Ellis. So now let's look after ourselves. I'll explain the plan in detail so there will be no slip-ups on your part. I'll go through the whole thing once, and if there are any questions, you'll ask me when I'm finished." The tons of commands were automatic that Jason found himself listening to quiet obedience, though one part of his mind wanted to smile at the quick assumption of his incompetence. Kirk swung the car into a steady line, the traffic heading out of the city to the spaceport. He drove easily while talked. "There is a search in the city, but we're all ahead of that. I'm sure the Silesians don't want to advertise their bad sportsmanship so much and won't be anything as crude as a roadblock. But the port will be crawling with every agent that they have. They know once the money gets off-planet, it's gone forever. When we make a break for it, they will be sure to still have the goods, so there will be no trouble with the munition ship getting clear." Jason sounded a little shocked. "You mean you're setting up the clay pigeons to cover the takeoff of the ship?" "You could put it that way, but since we have to get off-planet anyway, there is no harm in using our escape as a smokescreen. Now shut up until I'm finished, like I told you. One more interruption and I dump you on the road." Jason was sure that he would. He listened intently and quietly as Kirk repeated word for word what he had said before, and then continued. "The official car gate will probably be wide open with the traffic through it, and a lot of the agents will be in plain clothes. We might even get into the field without getting recognized, though I doubt it. It is of no importance. We will drive through the gate and take off pad. The Pride of Darken of which we hold tickets, will sound in 2 minutes siren and undocking the gangway. By the time we get to our seats, the ship will take off." "That's all very fine," Jason said, "but what will the guards be doing all this time?" "Shooting at us and each other. We will be taking advantage of the confusion aboard." This answer did nothing to settle Jason's mind, but he let it slide for the moment. "All right. Say we do get aboard, why don't they just prevent takeoff until they have dragged out and stood us against the wall?" Kirk spared him a contemptuous glance before he returned his eyes to the road. "I said the ship was the Pride of Darkham. If you had studied the system at all, you would know what that means. Cilicia and Darkham are sister planets and rivals in every way. It has been less than 2 centuries since they fought an intra-system war that almost destroyed both of them. They exist in an arm-to-the-teeth neutrality that neither dare violate. The moment we set foot on the board of the ship of the Darkham territory, there is no extradition agreement between the 2 planets. Cilicia may want us, but not badly enough to start another war." That was all explained that there was time for. Kirk... Sorry. I lost my place. I scrolled down thinking it would remove the lines a bit, out of habit, and I changed the entire page. This is a top-notch operation I'm running here. The barrier gates began to swing inwards as Kirk jammed down on the accelerator. Everything happened at once. The turbine howled, the spinning tires screeched, and the road and the car crashed open to the gate. Jason had a vanishing glimpse of the open-mouthed guards. Then they were skidding around the corner of a building. A few shots popped after them, but none came close. Driving with one hand, Kirk reached under the dash and pulled out a gun that was the twin of the monster strapped on his arm. "Use this instead of your own," he said. "Rocket-propelled explosive slugs. Makes a great bang. Don't bother shooting at anyone. I'll take care of that. Just stir up a little action and make them keep the distance like this." He fired a single snapshot out of the side window and passed the gun to Jason almost before the slug hit. An empty truck blew up with a roar, raining pieces of cars around them and sending the drivers fleeing in panic. After that, it was a nightmare ride through the madhouse. Kirk drove with an apparent contempt for violent death. Other cars followed them and were lost in the wheel-raising turns. They careened almost to the full length of the field, leaving a trail of smoking chaos. Then the pursuit was all behind them, and the only thing ahead of them was a slim spire of the Pride of Darkham. The Pride was surrounded by a strong wire fence as suited with the begrudged status of her planetary origin. The gate was closed and guarded by soldiers with leveled guns, waiting for a shot at the approaching car. Kirk made no attempt to come near them. Instead, he fed the last reserves of the power of the car and headed for the fence. "Cover your face," he shouted. Jason put his arms in front of his head just as they hit. Torn metal screamed and the fence buckled, wrapping itself around the car. But it did not break. Jason flew off his seat and into the padded dash. By the time Kirk had wrapped the door open, he realized that the ride was over. Kirk must have spun his eyeballs because he didn't talk. He just pulled. Thank you very much, Timmy. It is very much appreciated. Jason out and threw him into the hood of the ruined car. "Climb over the window. Climb over the buckled wire and make a run for the ship," he shouted. If there was any doubt of what he meant, he set Jason for an example of fine road work. It was inconceivable that someone of his bulk could run so fast. Yet he did so. He moved more like a charging tank than a man. Jason shook the fog from his head and worked up some speed himself. Nevertheless, he was barely halfway to the ship when Kirk hit the gangway. It was already unhooked from the ship, but the shocked attendant stopped rolling it away as the big man bounded up the steps. At the top, he turned and fired the soldiers who were charging through the open gate. They dropped, crawled, and returned his fire. A very shot at Jason's running form. The scene in front of Jason cranked over the slow motion. Kirk, standing at the top of the ramp, coolly returning fire that splashed all about. He could have found safety in an instant through that open port behind him. The only reason he stayed there was to cover Jason. "Thanks," Jason managed to gasp as he made the last few steps to the gangway and jumped up the gap to the collapsed inside the ship. "Your safety, and you're perfectly welcome," Kirk said as he joined him, waving his gun off to cool it. The grim George ship's officer stood back out of range of the fire from the ground and looked at them both up and down. "And just what do we have here?" he growled. Kirk tested the barrel with a wet thumb, and then he let the glide slap back into his holster. "We're law-abiding citizens of a different system who've committed no criminal acts. These savages of Sicilia have caused too barbarous for civilized company. Therefore, we are going to calm. Here are our tickets. In whose sovereign territory I believe we are at this moment." The last was added as a benefit for the Sicilian officer who had just stumbled onto the gangway and was raising his gun. The soldier couldn't be blamed. He saw these badly wanted criminals getting away, aboard the Darkham ship as well. Anger got the best of him, and he brought his gun up. "Come out there, you scum! You're not escaping that easily. Come out, slow, and with your hands up or I'll blast you." It was a frozen moment in time that stretched and stretched before breaking. The pistol covered Kirk and Jason. Neither of them attempted to reach for their own guns. The gun twitched a bit, and the ship's officer moved and then steadied back on the two men. The darkened spaceman hadn't gone far, just a space across the lock. This was enough to bring him next to the red box with flushed on the wall. With a single, swift gesture, he flipped the cover and poised his thumb over the button inside. When he smiled, his lips peeled back to show all of his teeth. He had made up his mind, and it was the arrogance of the Sicilian officer that had been the deciding factor. "Fire a single shot into Darkham territory. I press this button," he shouted, "and you know what this does. Every one of your ships has them as well. Commit a hostile act against this ship, and someone will press a button. Every control rod will blow out, and the ships pile at that instant, and half of your filthy city will go up in an explosion." His smile was chiseled on his face, and there was no doubt that he would have to do what he said. "Go ahead, fire. I would enjoy pressing this." The takeoff siren was hooting now, the clock light blinking, an angry message from the bridge. Like four actors in a grim drama, they faced each other in an instant more. Then the Caecilian officer, growling in an unvoicable, frustrated anger, turned and leapt back to the steps. All passengers aboard the ship, 45 seconds to take off, clear the port. The ship's officer slammed shut the cover of the box and locked it as he talked. There was barely time to make acceleration couches before the Pride of Duckham cleared the ground. End of chapter. So yeah, I think I'm going to call it there. I'm struggling to concentrate at this moment, which is not really that strange, since as it is 1:30 in the morning. I'm getting a bit too old for this early stuff. Well, I can do it, it's just concentrating becomes a bit difficult. So I hope you all had a nice listen and a good evening, and some entertainment as always. I will be trying to do this on a weekly basis. I make no promises. Most of the reason why I stopped streaming is the country I live in has load shedding at unpredictable times, so it makes it very difficult to pre-plan when I'm able to do streams or not, especially seeing as they don't let us know too far in advance when we'll be affected. It's a pleasure, homeschool. There does seem to be a ridiculous lag. It seems to be about 45 seconds to a minute. It's quite a lot. But from what I can gather is there are quite a few people streaming at this moment as well. A lot more than usual. You too. Alrighty everybody, I hope you all have a good one, and I'll see you next week for the live stream next week, but there will be the normal videos during the week as well. Alrighty, I hope you all have a good one, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.